Have you ever poured your entire soul into a person, a family, a life, only to realize you were just a ghost haunting the halls of your own home? Have you ever given your quiet strength, your endless patience, your unwavering loyalty, believing it was the foundation of something beautiful, only to have them tear it all down and try to build on your ruins? I have. For 10 years, I was the silent partner in my own life, the stage manager for a play where everyone else was a star. My name is Lila, and this is the story of how, on my 30th birthday, I finally took center stage. The party was my creation, a testament to my quiet efficiency. The garden glowed with hundreds of fairy lights I had strung myself, each tiny bulb a prayer for a magical evening. The food, a lavish spread of all my husband Mark's favorite things, was arranged with artistic precision. The playlist, a carefully curated mix of soft jazz and nostalgic hits, was designed to make everyone feel comfortable, happy, celebrated. Yet, I felt like an intruder. I moved through the smiling crowds in the dove-gray dress Mark had picked out, not because he knew my taste, but because it made me blend into the background. I was a gracious hostess, a smiling wife, a supportive sister. But I was not a participant. I was scenery. My husband, Mark, was the sun around which this entire universe revolved. He was radiant, his laughter echoing across the manicured lawn. He moved with an easy charm that drew people in, a magnetism I had once mistaken for warmth. Now, I saw it for what it was, a performance. He would catch my eye from across the garden, his smile a flash of white teeth, a perfect picture of a doting husband for the audience. But his eyes were empty when they looked at me. They scanned right past, searching for the next hand to shake, the next back to clap. Then there was my brother, Evan. The golden boy. While I was the quiet, responsible one, Evan was the dazzling, ambitious one. Our parents had poured their dreams into him, and more recently, our grandmother had poured her fortune into his much-lauded tech startup. He and Mark had become inseparable over the past few years, a bond everyone called brotherly. I had thought it was sweet, a sign that my two worlds, my family and my marriage, had merged so perfectly. I had been so wrong. I watched them now, standing near the grand oak tree, heads bent together, sharing a low, intimate laugh. The way Mark's hand lingered on Evan's arm was not the way a man touches his brother-in-law. It was possessive. It was proprietary. A cold dread, a familiar companion for the last year, coiled tighter in my stomach. The puzzle pieces were all there, scattered in my memory. The late nights Mark spent at the office with Evan, the hushed phone calls that ended abruptly when I entered the room, the private jokes that excluded me entirely. I had explained it all away, blinded by a desperate, hopeful love. But tonight, under the cruel clarity of the fairy lights I had so carefully hung, the picture was becoming terrifyingly clear. I was not just being ignored, I was being erased. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of night-blooming jasmine and the suffocating weight of unspoken truths. I tried to anchor myself, to find a familiar face in the sea of polite smiles. I drifted towards Mark, hoping for a moment of connection, a simple touch that could dispel the growing storm inside me. I reached for his hand, my fingers brushing against his expensive suit sleeve. "It's a wonderful party, isn't it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't turn his head, his focus locked on a wealthy investor he was trying to impress. "It's great, honey, really great," he murmured, his tone dismissive. He gave my hand a brief, performative squeeze before pulling away. "Can't you see I'm networking? We'll talk later. It was always later. Later was a barren wasteland where promises went to die. I felt the familiar sting of rejection, a tiny paper cut on my soul, one of thousands I had endured over the years. I retreated, my cheeks burning with a quiet shame. I found my mother by the dessert table, her eyes shining with pride as she watched Mark hold court. "Isn't he just incredible, Lila?" she sighed, not even looking at me. "So charming, so successful. You are the luckiest girl in the world." I tried to voice the anxiety clawing at my throat. "Mom, does something seem off to you? Between Mark and Evan?" She finally turned to me, her perfectly painted smile tightening. "Lila, for heaven's sake, don't be so dramatic. It's your birthday. They're like brothers." You should be happy they get along so well. Honestly, sometimes you create problems where there are none. Her words were a casual dismissal, another brick in the wall they had all built around me. My concerns were not valid, they were a flaw in my character. I was too sensitive, too dramatic, too much. I felt my spirit shrink, folding in on itself. My gaze swept the garden and landed on my grandmother, Eleanor. She sat alone in a wrought iron chair, away from the noise, a glass of untouched champagne on the table beside her. She wasn't smiling. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent despite her 80 years, were fixed on the scene before her. She was watching everyone, but especially, she was watching me. Her gaze was a question mark. It saw my plastered smile, my wandering, lost expression. It saw the way Mark brushed me aside, the way my mother patronized me. Our eyes met for a long, silent moment. She raised a delicate eyebrow, an invitation to speak, to confide. I wanted to run to her, to crumble at her feet and let the whole ugly truth spill out. But years of conditioning, of being the family shock absorber, held me in place. I gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of my head and forced another smile. But the look she gave me in return was different. It wasn't pity. It was assessment. It was the look of a perceptive leader who had just noticed a critical flaw in her own organization, a flaw she could no longer ignore. The knot of dread in my stomach tightened into a hard, cold stone. The party wasn't a celebration. It was a stage, and the final act was about to begin. The laughter and music seemed to fade into a low hum, the world narrowing to a single point of focus. Mark and Evan had moved to the center of the patio, positioning themselves in a small clearing that had formed. Mark picked up a champagne flute and tapped it with a knife, the clear, high-pitched ring cutting through the chatter. A hush fell over the garden. The fairy lights seemed to flicker, casting long, dancing shadows. Everyone turned towards them. They stood shoulder to shoulder, a united front of blinding charisma. Mark's arm was slung casually around Evan's shoulders, a gesture of camaraderie that now looked sinister, possessive. "Friends, family," Mark began, his voice smooth and confident, the voice of a man who had never been denied anything in his life. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate my beautiful wife Lila's 30th birthday," he paused, gesturing vaguely in my direction without meeting my eyes. A smattering of polite applause rippled through the crowd. I stood frozen, my hands clammy, my heart pounding a frantic, desperate rhythm against my ribs. "But tonight," he continued, turning his full, beaming attention to my brother, "we have another reason to celebrate. Something truly special." Evan stepped forward slightly, his face glowing with a mixture of nerves and pure, unadulterated triumph. He looked boyish and handsome, the golden son about to deliver the news everyone had been waiting for. My mother was already dabbing at her eyes with a napkin, assuming he was about to announce a massive success for his company. "Mark and I," Evan started, his voice thick with emotion, "have found something incredible together. A love that is honest and pure and true." The silence that followed was no longer polite. It was a thick, heavy blanket of confusion. I saw heads tilting, people exchanging bewildered glances. My father's smile faltered. My mother's hand froze on its way to her face. I knew. In that split second before the words were spoken, I knew exactly what was coming. It wasn't a shock, it was a confirmation. It was the final, brutal piece of the puzzle locking into place. The late nights, the secret smiles, the shared glances, it all coalesced into a single, horrifying image. My entire marriage, my entire world, was a lie. And then, Evan said the words, looking not at me, not at our family, but deep into my husband's eyes. "Mark and I are in love. And tonight, we are thrilled to announce our engagement." The world didn't just slow down, it shattered. The sound of a champagne flute slipping from someone's hand and smashing on the stone patio was like a gunshot in the deafening silence. Every single eye in that garden swiveled to me. They stared with a gruesome mix of pity, horror, and morbid fascination. They were waiting for the explosion, for the tears, for the screaming accusations. But none of that came. Instead, a strange and terrible calm washed over me. The pain was so immense, so absolute, that it transcended itself, becoming a kind of crystalline clarity. I wasn't a victim in a tragedy. I was a fool in a farce. And I was done playing my part. The immediate aftermath was a symphony of chaos conducted by my family's disbelief. The first note was a choked gasp, followed by the soft thud of my mother's body slumping to the ground in a dead faint. My father, his face a mask of gray confusion, yelled her name and rushed to her side, creating a ripple of panic that spread through the guests. People surged forward, murmuring, whispering, their faces a gallery of shock and scandalous delight. In the center of it all, Mark and Evan stood, their grand romantic declaration now hanging in the air like a toxic cloud. For a fleeting moment, Mark looked startled by the chaos he'd unleashed. But then his eyes found mine across the panicked crowd. There was no remorse in his gaze. There was no apology. There was only a cold, hard challenge. His jaw was set, his eyes narrowed, as if to say, I've made my move. What are you going to do now? It was a declaration of war. Evan, my brother, looked nothing short of ecstatic. The feint had barely registered. His eyes were shining, fixed on me with a look of smug victory. He had not just won Mark, he had defeated me. He had taken the one thing in my life that was supposed to be solely mine and claimed it for himself, publicly and brutally. It was the ultimate power play in a sibling rivalry I had never even realized we were fighting. I remained utterly still, a statue in the eye of the hurricane. The whispers washed over me, words like humiliation, scandal, poor Lila, the pity in their eyes felt like acid. They saw me as a pathetic figure, a wife so blind and foolish, she didn't see the affair happening between her own husband and her own brother. They were waiting for me to break, to run, to dissolve into the hysterical woman they expected me to be. But something inside me had fundamentally shifted. The woman who had planned this party, the accommodating, peacekeeping, invisible Lila, had died the moment Evan spoke those words. In her place, something new was hardening. The years of swallowing my feelings, of minimizing my own needs, of absorbing the casual cruelty of the two men I loved most, had compressed all my pain and sorrow into a single, unbreakable point of resolve. This was not an ending. It was an ignition. My breath, which had been trapped in my chest, was released in a slow, steady exhale. My posture straightened. I felt the ground solid beneath my feet for the first time all night. Mark's challenge, Evan's smugness, the crowd's pity, it all became fuel. They thought they had destroyed me. They had no idea they had just handed me the weapon I needed to save myself. The ghost was about to learn how to scream. I began to walk. Each step was deliberate, measured, cutting a silent path through the gawking crowd. They parted for me as if I were royalty or a leper, I wasn't sure which. My destination was the small portable speaker and microphone set up on a table, intended for heartfelt birthday toasts that now seemed like a bitter joke. I picked up the microphone, its cool weight a comfort in my hand. I felt the familiar feedback hum as I switched it on. The sound made everyone freeze. Even my father, kneeling beside my still unconscious mother, looked up. Mark and Evan turned, their triumphant bubble finally pierced by this unexpected act of defiance. The garden fell into a profound, anticipatory silence. "Thank you," I said. My voice didn't shake. It was clear, calm, and carried across the lawn with an authority no one in that garden had ever heard from me before. "Thank you, Evan. And thank you, Mark, for this unforgettable birthday gift." The sarcasm was subtle, a razor's edge coated in ice. Mark's eyes widened slightly. This was not the reaction he had prepared for. He took a half step forward, his hand raised as if to stop me. "Lila, don't," he warned, his voice low and threatening. "Don't make a scene." Evan, however, still looked smug, believing my response was nothing more than the final, pathetic thrashing of a woman defeated. He underestimated me. They both always had. "A scene?" I let out a short, sharp laugh. It was not a sound of amusement. It was the sound of chains breaking. The scene was already made, Mark. It was made when my brother announced his love for my husband in the middle of my birthday party. "This," I said, my gaze sweeping over the rapt audience before landing squarely on my brother, "is merely a clarification." Evan's self-satisfied smirk began to falter. A flicker of uncertainty, then real panic, crossed his face. He didn't understand what was happening. He thought he held all the cards. I turned my body slightly, addressing not just him, but my entire family, my eyes seeking out my grandmother, Eleanor. She had risen from her chair and was now standing, her posture rigid, her focus entirely on me. She was the true authority in our family, the matriarch whose respect and fortune they all coveted. You see, I continued, my voice gaining strength with every word, you two stand here talking about love and honesty. It's a beautiful sentiment. But honesty is a funny thing, isn't it, Evan? It's not a buffet. You don't get to pick and choose which truths you serve to people. A nervous sweat began to bead on Evan's forehead. The golden boy was starting to tarnish. You've forgotten something, I said, letting the words hang in the air. A secret. A very important secret you've been keeping. Not just from me, and not just from Mark, but from the very people who trusted you the most. My accusation hung in the still night air, a tangible thing. The atmosphere shifted from one of scandalous gossip to tense, high-stakes drama. Evan's face, once beaming with triumph, was rapidly draining of all color. He looked from me to Mark, then to our grandmother, like a cornered animal searching for an escape route that no longer existed. Lila, stop it, he stammered, his voice losing its confident timbre. You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? I took another step closer, the microphone cord trailing behind me like a fuse. I know everything, Evan. That's always been my role in this family, hasn't it? I'm the quiet one. The observer. The one who cleans up the messes and keeps the secrets. And oh, what a secret this one is. I turned my full attention to my grandmother, Eleanor, whose gaze was now like a physical force, pinning Evan in place. Grandmother, I said, my voice softening with a genuine sorrow for the pain I was about to cause her. You believed in him. We all did. Evan, the prodigy. The tech genius with the brilliant startup that was going to change the world, I let the praise hang in the air, twisting it into an indictment. You gave him a substantial investment. I believe the amount was $250,000. To scale up production, he said. To hire a new team. To secure a new office, every word was a hammer blow against the facade Evan had so carefully constructed. He was visibly trembling now. But there is no new office, is there, Evan? I asked, my voice dropping to a near whisper that was somehow more menacing than a shout. There is no new team. In fact, there is no startup. Not anymore. There never really was, not in the way you claimed. The collective gasp from the remaining family members was sharp and painful. My father, who had managed to help my groggy mother into a chair, stared at his son with dawning horror. Mark was looking at Evan now, not with love, but with pure, undiluted confusion. She's lying, Evan shouted, his voice cracking. She's hysterical. She's just trying to hurt me because of this. He gestured wildly between himself and Mark. But his denial was weak, his panic too raw to be anything but genuine. The lie was collapsing in on him in real time, and he had nowhere to hide. I simply held my ground, my expression calm and certain. I didn't need to shout. I had the one thing he had forsaken, the truth. And it was more powerful than any lie he could ever tell. Hysterical. I repeated the word, letting it hang in the air, exposing its ugliness. That's the word you men use when a woman's truth is inconvenient, isn't it? But my memory is not hysterical, Evan. It's precise. I looked at him, my eyes tracing the lines of fear on his face. I remember when you were 16 and you failed your high school computer science class. I remember spending a whole summer tutoring you myself, trying to teach you the basics of coding. You couldn't even grasp the fundamentals. But I kept it quiet. I helped you with your homework so Dad wouldn't be disappointed. I smoothed it over. I glanced at our father, whose face was now a study in bewildered pain. I remember balancing your first checkbook for you because you kept spending money you didn't have. I covered for you then, too. Because that's what I do. That's who I was. I kept the peace at my own expense. My voice was a steady, relentless drumbeat of facts. So when you came to us with this brilliant idea for a tech company, I had my doubts. But I saw how happy it made our parents, how proud it made our grandmother. And I saw how much you wanted it. So I kept quiet. I hoped you had changed. I hoped you had finally become the man everyone thought you were. I took a deep breath, preparing for the final, Devastating blow. "The money grandmother Eleanor gave you," I said, my voice ringing with clarity. "It's gone, isn't it? Every last cent. Spent on that sports car you told everyone was a company vehicle, spent on lavish trips to Europe with Mark, which you passed off as investor meetings, spent on expensive clothes and five-star dinners to maintain the illusion of success. It was all spent on this hollow, pathetic lie you built on our family's trust." The focus of the room shifted entirely from me to him. He was no longer the triumphant lover. He was a common thief, a fraud. My grandmother, Eleanor, who had been listening with a terrifying stillness, finally moved. She walked forward, her back ramrod straight, her elegant dress sweeping across the grass. She stopped directly in front of Evan, her eyes, once filled with pride for him, now as cold and hard as diamonds. "Evan," she said, her voice trembling not with weakness, but with a monumental rage. "Is this true?" Evan opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked to Mark, a desperate, silent plea for help, for his partner to stand by him. But Mark wasn't looking at him with love anymore. He was looking at him with the sickening realization that he had hitched his wagon to a fraud. The alliance was broken. The love story was over. Mark stared at Evan, the pieces clicking together in his own mind. The easy money, the lack of any real business talk, the constant excuses about proprietary software. He had been duped just as thoroughly as everyone else. His romantic prize was a con artist. "You lied?" Mark's voice was a hoarse whisper of disbelief. "You lied to me? The company, you said it was valued at 10 million. You said we were set for life, though we hung in the air, a pathetic remnant of a future that had just evaporated." The betrayal on Mark's face was absolute. He had torpedoed his marriage, his reputation, his comfortable life, for a man who was nothing but a mirage of success. The foundation of their grand romance was quicksand, and they were both sinking. Faced with the fury of his grandmother and the disgust of his lover, Evan finally shattered. The bravado, the smugness, the charm, it all dissolved, leaving behind a pathetic, weeping boy. Sobs racked his body as he collapsed to his knees on the grass, the confessions spilling out of him in a torrent of pathetic excuses and self-pity. The startup had been a failure from the beginning. The initial seed money was gone in 6 months. The rest was a desperate, panicked scramble to keep up appearances, a Ponzi scheme played out with his own family's love and money. As I listened to his confession, I felt no thrill of victory. There was no joy in his destruction. There was only a profound, hollow sadness for the brother I once loved and the man he had become. But beneath the sadness, there was also a deep, quiet sense of release. The heavy burden of their lies was no longer mine to carry. The truth was out, and I was free. In that moment of absolute chaos, my grandmother, Eleanor, did something that changed everything. She turned her back on her weeping, disgraced grandson. She walked past the stunned and horrified Mark. She came directly to me. She took both of my hands in her own. Her skin was frail, but her grip was firm, grounding. She looked into my eyes, and for the first time, I felt truly seen by my family. "Lila," she said, her voice thick with emotion but powerfully clear. "My dear, brave girl. I am so sorry," tears welled in her eyes. "We were so dazzled by the bright, noisy one that we failed to appreciate the one with true strength, true character. I failed you. And I will spend the rest of my days making it right." In that instant, the entire power dynamic of our family was rewritten. The focus was no longer on the salacious affair or the financial fraud. It was on the quiet, overlooked woman who had borne the weight of it all in silence and who had found the courage to speak. Her apology was my validation. Her support was my vindication. I had not just exposed a lie, I had reclaimed my worth in the eyes of the one person who mattered most. Grandmother Eleanor released my hands and turned to face the wreckage of the party. Her demeanor was no longer that of a grieving matriarch, but of a CEO taking decisive, corrective action. She addressed the few remaining guests, mostly close family and shell-shocked friends, her voice leaving no room for argument. "This party is over," she announced, her tone sharp and final. "I suggest you all go home." Her gaze then fell upon Mark, who stood frozen, a deer caught in the headlights of his own catastrophic life choices. "Mark," she said, her voice dripping with ice. "You will pack a bag with your immediate necessities. You will be out of this house, my daughter's house, tonight. The rest of your things will be sent to you. Do not attempt to contact Lila again." She didn't raise her voice, but the command was absolute. This was the catalyst in her finest hour, a perceptive authority figure moving from silent observation to active, powerful leadership. She was not just restoring order, she was enforcing justice. Mark opened his mouth, perhaps to argue, perhaps to plead. He looked at me, a desperate, confused expression on his face, as if he still couldn't comprehend how he had lost control of the narrative so completely. But I no longer saw him. I looked straight through him, my face a placid mask of indifference. He had made me invisible for years, and now I was returning the favor. He had ceased to exist for me. Seeing the utter finality in my eyes, he visibly deflated. The charming, confident man was gone, replaced by a defeated shell. He turned without another word and walked toward the house, his shoulders slumped, his glorious future now a pile of ash. My grandmother then turned her attention to the sobbing heap on the lawn that was my brother. "Evan," she said, her voice void of any warmth. "You and I, along with my lawyers, have an appointment tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. sharp. Be there." The implication was terrifyingly clear. There would be no sweeping this under the rug. There would be consequences. My father, his face pale and etched with a decade's worth of new wrinkles, helped Evan to his feet and began guiding him away, a father leading his condemned son. My mother sat in her chair, dazed and silent, staring into the empty space where her perfect life used to be. The garden was almost empty now. The fairy lights flickered over abandoned glasses and plates of uneaten cake. Amidst the debris of my former life, I stood tall. I felt a profound, almost sacred sense of peace settle over me. I had lost a husband who never loved me and a brother who had betrayed me. But in the rubble, I had finally, truly found myself. The overlooked gem, once buried under layers of duty and expectation, was finally free to catch the light. Some time has passed. The scene is different now. It's not a sprawling garden filled with fake smiles, but a small, sun-drenched apartment. The walls are a warm white, covered in my own canvases, vibrant with color and life. It smells of turpentine and fresh coffee. This space is modest, but it is entirely mine. I am standing at an easel, a paintbrush in my hand, a smudge of cobalt blue on my cheek. It's a hobby I abandoned years ago because Mark found it messy and my mother called it impractical. But here, in the quiet of my new beginning, it feels essential. It feels like breathing. And now, I want to talk to you again, directly. They thought my silence was weakness. They thought my kindness was a welcome mat, something to be wiped on as they entered the grand house of their own ambitions. They mistook my patience for acceptance and my loyalty for blindness. But they forgot the single most important truth about the quiet ones, the observers, the people who hold everything together from the shadows. We are the ones who know where all the bodies are buried. We know where the structural weaknesses are, where the cracks in the foundation lie. And our silence is not empty. It is full of everything we have seen, everything we have absorbed. It is a reservoir of power, waiting for the moment it is needed most. My story is not one of revenge. Revenge is a bitter, empty meal. This was about reclamation. It was about taking back my voice, my dignity, and my future from the people who tried to steal it. The climax wasn't watching them fall, it was the moment I chose to stand up. True strength isn't about being the loudest person in the room or the one with the most power. It isn't about grand gestures or public declarations. It's a quiet, internal fortitude. It is the courage to know your own worth, especially when no one else seems to recognize it. It's the resilience to withstand the storm and the wisdom to know when it's time to become the storm. Your value is not determined by how others treat you. It is intrinsic. It is non-negotiable. If you have ever been made to feel small, invisible, or unimportant, I want you to remember this story. I want you to remember that your quiet strength is not a liability. It is your greatest weapon. Your truth has power, even if your voice shakes when you speak it. Never, ever let anyone convince you that you are just scenery in their story. You are the lead. You are the author. You're the light. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded of the fire they hold inside. Remind them, and remind yourself, that even after the darkest night, the sun will always, always rise. And you deserve to be standing in its warmth.